firstly, congratulations on Never After
Thank you.
Dark. I'm playing at
Thanks.
Sydney Film Festival this year. Um, I know you have some history with Sydney.
Yeah.
was doing my homework. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I lived there for 2 years from 2001 to 2003. So I love Sydney. A lot of great memories there. I've been wanting to go back. Wish I could go back this year for the festival. It just happened to coincide right when Never After Dark is being released in Japan. So I've been here working on the release and the promotional campaign and everything. So I didn't Time didn't quite work out, but I'd love to go back one day.
You were living here just after the Olympics, which was like the biggest deal for us.
Yeah, yeah, I remember sort of and I moved there just shortly after 9/11 and so there was sort of a like I ended up spending a lot of time around at the time uh the American Express building by Hyde Park. I don't know if it's still the American Express building, but there was all these sort of new security precautions going up all over. Anyway, it was a very sort of weird time in the world. But you know, I love being in Sydney and love the city.
Hmm. Well, now jumping forward to Never After Dark. When I was kind of reading reviews, or especially coming out of South by Southwest, a lot of people kind of compared it to kind of Asian horror cinema classics like The Ring, like A Tale of Two Sisters. But I'm just wondering, from your like, what were the inspirations for the film from you?
I think a lot of it was you know, I mean, I feel like there are a lot of sort of subconscious influences for sure, just because I watch a lot of horror movies and I read a lot of, mystery novels and thrillers and everything. I think part of it was I wanted to sort of come up with a horror movie that could express the idea that the living are scarier than the dead. And but part of the problem with that is then you have a main character who's not afraid of ghosts. So how do you make the audience scared? And I think that probably one of the biggest inspirations for me was this movie from 1980 called The Changeling with George C. Scott, which is one of my favorite ghost stories, and it's got a really intricately plotted mystery at the center of it. But George C. Scott is such an interesting main character for a ghost story because he's not, he doesn't scream in fright. He's not necessarily scared. He seems more sort of like, what's going on here? He seems almost annoyed. But I find that movie really, really scary. And so I was interested in like, well, how does that work? Because ordinarily, sort of the person at the center, if they're not scared, it's hard for the audience to sort of be in their shoes. And a lot of J horror, a lot of at least to me, what makes that scary is the fear of the unknown, and the fear of something that doesn't quite sort of match up to the logic of the living world, if that makes sense. At least that's why it's scary to me. And then oftentimes in those movies, you would have um, a, a female ghost, somebody who was, a victim of a terrible crime, who had no power in the living world necessarily, but suddenly has all of this power as a spirit, as a ghost, and uses that to wreak vengeance on the world that sort of cast them aside. And so I kind of wanted to tweak that, that formula in a little bit, not necessarily the formula, but that format, and have a ghost at the center of it who is not a victim but was a perpetrator and doesn't deserve, any sort of sympathy at all. And so those, I don't know, those were sort of the two angles that I came out of because I was a huge, the J horror boom kind of happened right when I was graduating from high school and made a huge impression on me when people were, initially discovering the Ring series and the Grudge series and everything like that. And there's no doubt those movies made a huge impression on me. But I would say there's a whole bunch of a whole cornucopia of influences involved.
Yeah, I was about to say, because even though I was reading a lot of articles and they were comparing it to J horror or Asian horror classics, your film reminded me of, have you seen Peter Jackson's The Frighteners with Michael J. Fox?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It reminded me of that, like a central character. They're almost like a, and we'll talk about more like a Hoshi. I butchered that name, sorry. But
No, no,
her character Irie, it's kind of like it's almost having like this Sherlock Holmes-esque character in the middle of the story, but they seem to understand these rules. But when it comes to just people or the living, especially in the Fridays case, they don't understand those rules, but they understand the rules of like the dead. And I thought that was really, yeah, that was the first movie I thought of after watching Never After Dark.
for sure. Yeah. No, I love that movie and you know, I think there's movies about mediums and seances or mediums or, you know, Ghostbusters, those kind of characters I've always been fascinated by is finding something that, you know, could live in a very specific tone was a lot of the fun of this movie trying to make it into something unique and new.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that central performance, what was the process like of crafting that character? Because I know she's got such a in a very short amount of time, like even in the first like I don't know 10 to 20 minutes of the film, you kind of understand her character straight away from her haircut, from the costuming, from the performance itself. Yeah, what was the process like of developing that character?
Definitely when it started with the script, I think that the first thing that we that I that, that we started with was just kind of the process, you know, that this is somebody who is a craftsman, that this is a job to her, that she has like this. I wanted it to be a very procedural kind of thing where you sort of see the tools laid out, and I wanted to come up with a whole new sort of ceremony that she uses to contact the dead. And the other thing was I didn't want to explain any of that stuff. I wanted it to be easy enough to understand that when you saw it, you just kind of get the idea of like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. Um, but to support sort of that central, you know, all those little tools and the process that she does, I felt like there needed to at least feel like there was a belief system at play or that there was some traditions handed down. And I wanted to give her sort of a fully fleshed out inner life, even though that's not always expressed in the movie. Like we wanted to keep the storytelling itself very, very minimal. So when I first met with Monica, you know, we didn't have a script yet. We just had sort of the idea and an outline, and we talked about it, and I definitely feel like she's an actor who likes to immerse herself as much as possible in whatever she's doing, and she wants to understand every detail. And that was a great collaboration because, you know, she would have questions about every tool in the, you know, in the toolbox that her character carries around and what it means and also, you know, just what kind of experiences the character would have had to make her so blasé about, you know, about dealing with ghosts and everything. So I think that, you know, in order, because we wanted it to be a fun and entertaining ghost story, but we wanted it to feel as real and sort of human as possible. And for Moika, that meant, you know, being able to immerse herself in as much of the world, even what's not shown in the movie. So I wrote a lot of material for her dealing with backstory, belief systems, you know, other sort of the background of the ceremony, the the spinning mirror that she uses, the tool that we created for the movie was also something that, you know, we created a setting for and a backstory for. And then dealing so there was you know, there was a lot of discussion with all the departments and also with Moika, like walking her through how to use all this stuff and what it all meant, what it all means, and then she's somebody who's just, you know, when the cameras are rolling, she's just so in it, so in immersed in her character. She sometimes, you know, she tends to, you know, every take is fresh and new working with her, and which was really fun. So it was a really exciting collaboration, and she's a, you know, a wonderful collaborator.
Well, speaking of which, there's kind of like those kind of tools that she has. I was wondering because like, because yeah, obviously I'm not particularly like, I'm not a filmmaker in terms of that element, but like so much of the film felt tactile and real and a lot of real effects and props and like, even the spinning mirror, which was like an amazing piece. The candle itself too. And of course, light spoiler, the like mangled jaw effect.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I guess like what inspired you to kind of go so practical when it came to making a horror film or this film?
I think part of it is just taste. Now we use CG in the movie, and you know we had a wonderful CG company, this company called Spade, here in Tokyo, who are just great. And I worked with them on my Netflix show House of Ninjas, which was very, very CG heavy, just a lot of green screen and everything. Personally, you know, especially in horror movies, I find whenever I feel something is CG, then suddenly it's not scary to me, and I don't know why. It's just something I can't quite put my finger on. But there's a lot of horror movies I like, but then the parts that are super CG heavy, for some reason, I feel sort of my engagement level drop, and it's very particular to that genre for me for some reason. And then the other thing was, it just we wanted to make this a little bit of a nostalgic throwback and have a very tactile sort of analog quality about it. So even when we were using CG, we were trying to use it to enhance something that was already there on screen. And so from the beginning, there was this um, overall direction of, okay, if we can have this in front of the camera, if we can shoot it, we're going to, and then we'll use CG, to sort of correct things or erase things, and other stuff where it just wasn't possible. So like poltergeist effects, where there's a lot of things, lots of stuff floating, flying around the room. In those cases, then we just had 30 people pulling on wires and hidden all around the room and everything, or puppeteering things and everything. Other things like the clock moving backwards, then the effects department rigged the clock to move backwards, which is surprisingly, no small feat. And Yeah, it's just there's something about that old style of making. It results in better performances too, because I think the actors can just see, they can just react to what's happening right in front of them. So that was the idea behind it. I definitely don't, I want to give major props to the CG folks too for doing such invisible work. But the production designer, his name is Yuji Hayashida, and the special effects makeup designer Tomo Hyakutake, they're both legends in the kind of effects and art world here in Japan, and they really brought their A game, because like even that the special effects makeup thing, just schedule wise, we couldn't have a guy sitting in the chair for 8 hours. It had to be something that he could get on in an hour and take off in, because he also has to switch back. Spoiler alert, he has to switch back and forth. So he came up with a really ingenious, prosthetic that really looks like an open mouth that has depth to it, even though what you're actually looking at is, his chin, and he could still talk while he was wearing it, even though it was just a single prosthetic attached to his face. So that, there was a lot of they brought a lot of ingenuity to making those things happen. Like that spinning mirror um, has sort of an zoetrope style animation that plays, and all that is practical. It was made by hand, and was we could see it happening on set. None of that was designed in post or anything. So that was one of the things about the movie that I'm the most proud of, and I hope people enjoy.
Did you get to keep that mirror?
Yeah, the mirror is actually the mirror is on display right now in sort of a pop-up store here in Tokyo, and then when the movie's released in other countries and stuff, we'll hopefully take it around, and yeah, we have a couple of them, because we made one that's fully sort of functional, and then a couple more that were, because it's really heavy. We made a couple more that were easier for her to carry or to use. There weren't necessarily stunts, but just use in some of the poltergeist scenes and stuff, so that it wouldn't hurt anybody or damage anything.
Well, speaking of spoilers, I thought I have a couple more questions before we wrap this up, but they're kind of spoiler territory. So I'm going to delineate for anyone watching this interview. This is the point now we should just see it. Try and catch it at the Sydney Film Festival. I think it's playing on the 10th, but I'm not sure. I think the session might be sold out already. Um,
Oh, great.
yeah, and I think it's also
Sweet.
playing today. So I guess it
Oh,
could have been in the past. Yeah. I'll double
yeah.
check the schedule though. Yeah, so if you have the chance, watch Never After Dark before we get into spoiler territory right now. Again,
Anybody who hasn't seen it, yeah,
yeah,
turn it off now.
is the point. Check out now. I guess the first question in terms of the spoiler territory, I just wrote in my questions why teeth? But yeah, why was that kind of like one of the central, like even when the villain says like in some cultures teeth are like the gateway to the soul. Why was teeth such a big part of this film?
I think, I wanted to come up with something that was scary because it was irrational. And because I think that people's compulsions, people's desires that are unexplainable are always inexplicable, and unexplainable are always the scariest things to me because it seems like so many of the, horrific things that you read about on the news and stuff, it just feels like, well, why? And so um, I have a thing about teeth. I find them very scary. I find dealing with them very scary. Going to the dentist and stuff is very unnerving to me. And so at a certain point, that just was when I was trying to think of kind of the scariest thing that something that would scare me. That's where my mind went. And then I just decided to resist the urge to explain it too much. But I will say, for people who have seen the movie, I feel like everything is explained. There's a scene where she has the sort of cloth over her head and is able to channel his spirit and speak for him. And everything about what that's all about is all explained in that scene. But I tried not to, underline it too much and just let people read into it what they may. There's something about I wanted to make a character who represented true evil, but also just sort of an inexplicable obsession that that I personally find very unnerving. So your mileage may vary, but yeah, the short answer is I don't know why teeth.
Have you heard of that? I'm not sure. Phenomena is, I don't think it's the right word, but like when you're stressed out, sometimes you can have a nightmare about having your teeth fall out, and for some reason that's related to stress. Um,
I have heard about that. I have heard about that, and I just remembered also there's an Edgar Allan Poe short story that gosh, I can't the title escapes me right now, but that left a huge impression on me when I read it. It was about a man who was obsessed with his cousin's teeth. Had sort of an erotic fixation on his, yeah, it's really really disturbing stuff. But I have heard that about that dream, and yeah, like teeth. I don't know. Teeth stuff gives me the willies. It just really scares me.
I was about to say I had that dream. I was stressed out last year and I had that dream. Yeah.
Oh wow,
And I was like, whoa,
you
this is real. I'm like, I full had it and it was awful.
that sounds terrible. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
I didn't like it. Um,
Yeah, that's
yeah. I guess as a last question, as a very last question to kind of wrap up this interview. One thing I really loved about this film is kind of, and you kind of touched a little bit about it before, but like this non-linear approach to like ghosts and spirits and haunting. Like you're kind of seeing things play out. I guess in the film, you're seeing them play out in like as the characters are experiencing them. But in terms of the spirits and the ghosts, it's kind of happening all at the same time, like time's overlapping on itself. And yeah, what inspired that decision? Because I thought it was so interesting.
I think that there tales about sort of premonitions of death and seeing specters are as old as time, right? And they come they're in all ancient cultures, and And in modern sort of parapsychology as well, those sort of phenomenons are really, really frequent. And I think back in movies, you it's definitely not a new idea. Like I think one of the other movies that we talked a lot about making this one was Don't Look Now, the Nicholas Roeg movie. And and in that one, and it, there's a moment where, the guy sees his wife dressed in black, with some other people, um, going somewhere, and you know, he doesn't understand what it was, but later you understand that she was going to his funeral, like it's a premonition of his own death. Um, so, so I was interested in that idea of the, premonitions and people who like where the spirits are sort of unstuck in time as well. Like a spirit being unstuck in time and going backwards is also something that has been explored in other works. Kurt Vonnegut has a whole there's a whole novel sort of built around that idea, and but I thought that what would be interesting and what potentially might be new is to make that into a threat, if that makes sense. Um, you're investigating a ghost the whole time, and the ghost is of the worst. It's the spirit of the most unpleasant and evil person imaginable. But since it's a ghost, there's only so much of a threat it can offer. However, then it shows up living in the flesh. Then you have a problem. So that's where I felt like there's maybe something new to explore. Um, and it's funny in Japanese culture, there's a what's called an ikiryo, a living spirit, which is basically a ghost appearing before the person has actually died, or that's an oversimplification of it is, but it's something that's an everyday idea. So it's interesting, like you know, when it's interesting just in sort of pitching this idea around, everybody kind of got it instantly because it's something that's just sort of a part of everyday culture. We are expressing it differently in the movie, and so I think people are still surprised by the twist, but at least I find that audiences in Japan have just kind of accepted it as oh yeah, it's an ikido.
Yeah, it felt like I don't know how to describe it, but it felt familiar but also fresh at the same time. And maybe
Oh,
that's
good.
yeah, like I don't know, like it's like there is something unsettling about someone being so unsettled that this split, like their spirit separates from their body, but not in like a ghost, not obviously ghost, but like not because they passed away, but because there's like I don't know, yeah, I thought it was really great.
Thanks. Yeah, no, it's that was one of the trickiest parts to figure out, as a team, how much to explain and how much to just kind of let people experience. And yeah, I hope people are surprised by it, and I hope that that it's fun and it all comes together in a satisfying way for them, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you for taking the time to chat and congratulations on Never After Dark.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.